Many statements uttered by Jesus in the Gospels reflect the interests and views of different communities of early Christians. Statements not said by the historical Jesus were put in the mouth of the Gospels Jesus. In other words, Gospels written around 85 AD are more about what was happening in 85 AD than what happened around 30 AD. We can easily account for the Gospels' discrepancies and contradictions if we accept that the Gospels are really about the communities in which the Gospels evolved, instead of about Jesus. The historical Jesus probably never encountered Pharisees in Galilee, but early Christians certainly struggled with Pharisees for power after the temple's destruction. The Gospels were written long after Jesus died around 30 AD. Mark's Gospel is from around 70 AD. Luke and Matthew wrote around 85. The last Gospel is from around 95. The real names of the individual evangelists are not known. It is likely that each Gospel came from a team of writers or editors. I suspect each team started by piecing together texts already in circulation, now lost. Some of the editing was badly done. Matthew's chapter 11 describes many signs, but soon afterwards Jesus is asked to give a sign. "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." That's from chapter 12. The "we" passage in Acts is crudely stitched to the end of other text embedded in Acts. The editors of Acts added a travel diary without removing the first person "we" for the sake of consistency in Acts. No gospel was produced by an eyewitness sitting down and writing the story of Jesus. I picture Luke and Matthew as Greek scribes hired by Christian communities to piece together existing texts. New material may have arisen with the employment of the Greek scribe. That is, fresh stories were written expressly for the Gospels being written, though old stories were also preserved. No one person's vision dominated. Instead, different members of Christian communities may have had a say in how the Gospels took shape. Early Christians had decades to come up with new words to place on the lips of Jesus, what the historical Jesus never uttered. They had time to find Old Testament passages worth reworking into something new for an evolving Jesus story. For example, only Luke tells of a widow's son being resurrected at Nain. This is an updated version of Elijah raising the son of a Shunammite woman in the second book of Kings, and Elijah earlier raised a widow's son from the dead in the first book of Kings. Mark's source for the miracle of Jesus feeding the crowds is in the second book of Kings. Elijah's assumption into heaven influenced Luke's description of Jesus ascending into the clouds. The four Gospels differ since they reflect the values of different communities. We are unable to pinpoint the identities of the four cities, but Greek was clearly an important language in them. The Synoptic Gospels agree to the extent that Luke and Matthew copied text verbatim from Mark's Gospel, but Luke and Matthew also made deliberate changes when copying from Mark, and changes reflect the particular values of Luke's community and of Matthew's community. Luke and Matthew made use of the now lost Q source, Cavella. Figuring out which statements were probably said by the historical Jesus is a challenge, but scholars have ways to identify what is authentic.